The loans DB code module behind sheet 3 is going to be used to program the worksheet selection change event. This event is triggered every time a selection in the loans DB worksheet is changed. We use the target range variable right here to check if the single cell selection is made, and it is in the column A that contains the customer name. So we're referring to this part here. Okay, if that is the case, and we'll talk about what if it's not as I code this, we use the adjacent customer ID in that hidden column B from the previous video to create another query that will grab the customer city as well as the loan information, again through the use of ADODB record set object. And this SQL query is going to be a little bit more elaborate than the ones we had thus far in this video series. Once the customer and associated loan information is displayed, and this will be done in this right side of the worksheet, okay, the monthly payments just for these loans are going to be recalculated right here as well. Okay, so let's switch to the code and sort of review the top part of, again, sheet 3 loans DB code module right behind the sheet 3. Our loans DB sheet contains this worksheet selection change event with the target variable as a parameter, right? So the last row variables called last row and L row are used for both the list of customers as well as the currently non-existent list of loans for a specific customer that we are working towards. And we're sort of assuming that the customers are listed here, and then the part of their worksheet with the list of loans for a specific customer is currently blank. Okay, so we're going to use these two variables, which are really constants, max customer and max loan, to sort of max out how far down this way we want to go and how far down this way we want to go, or we are allowed to go. Then we have some of these string variables or customer related variables, like which customer was selected based on the full name, and then associated customer ID. Then we're going to have the string variable for the relatively complex SQL string, which will take a little bit of time to build, and then associated record set, ADODB record set object. We have some record counter and top cell as we used to have before. So the maxed we're going to max out customers at 20, which is a low number, but it's good enough for this example. And for each of the customers, we're going to max out the loans at 10. Typically, there is a 1, 2, or 3 at the most. The last row variable is already set to go down to the bottom of the column A. And this needs a little bit of elaborating so you can understand what's going to sort of happen next. If, for some reason, the list of customers is not there, which would be the case if the loans DB code module where the get customers procedure was not executed, then this code that starts with cell A1 and goes down to the bottom will actually go all the way to the bottom of the entire Excel workbook, which is the row over 1 million, which will, even for the which is obviously going to be a mistake. This is why we have, as a first check right out of step 1 here, an if statement that asks if last row minus 1, and this is just a 1 offset because of the labels being in the first row, is less than or equal to max number of customers. Okay, if that is the case, that means that we do have some customers, because if this was not the case, that would have meant that the last row is 1 point something million, which would then in what I just explained mean that we do not actually have any customers. I'm going to close that and if at the bottom. Now, I should have had an else right here showing a message box saying you must have some customers in the list first, but let's just skip that. That's sort of assumed to be the case in this example. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to assume that we do have the customers, such as these 10 listed here, and then we're going to start using the target variable, which is the one passed through the procedure, right? So the first thing we want to check is whether the column of the target variable is number one, which is to say the A column. If it's not, okay, we don't care about that change in the worksheet selection. So if the currently active cell was whatever and the change in the selection was from whatever that cell was to another one that is not in column A, we don't care about that. So we care only about column A and then the range of rows, right? The range of rows has to be target dot row greater than 1, skipping the labels again, and target dot row has to be less than or equal to max customers. So that's going to, again, that's going to prohibit, right, or ignore, I should say, clicking way down towards the bottom of column A. Then we are roughly in the area that we want to be, right? We're in column A between the second row essentially and the 20th row if you consider that max customers is 20. Okay, if this is not the case, again, we should display a message saying something to the effect that you must make a selection in column A, blah blah blah, and I'm going to have some of that later, but not in this context. We're going to zero in a little bit further with third if here, which is going to check whether, first of all, the target dot count is greater than 1. If that's the case, then we are going to display the message because we don't want the user to select more than one cell, because that doesn't have any meaning for us, right? Even if you select in the right range, which is this customer list, but you select 2 customers, that is wrong, because we are we want to be working with one customer at a time, so we are able to display his or hers loan information on the right side eventually. So we're going to save something to the effect message box in double quotes, you must select a single customer. Please try again. Okay, and exit sub. Okay, so assuming that we selected a single customer, right, we could have still went down towards the bottom of this list, let's say, in a row that corresponds to 18th customer, which does not exist because we only have 10, right? In other words, somewhere here. So we have to check for that as well. So if the check that's selected is within the proper range but is blank, in other words, it's not a customer, we need to display a message as well, and make the user aware that he has to actually click on a cell with the customer name. So target dot value, and this is sort of allows you to sort of see a number of different properties of the target cell, right? Like column, row, count, value, and so forth. So here, let me copy this message box and exit sub and just modify the text. You selected a blank cell. Please try again. Okay, so at this point, we're going to assume that a single customer, actual customer, like one of these 10 from row 2 to row 11 in this case, is or has been selected. Okay, now you have to also think about the fact that this is going to be done continuously, right? I'm going to click on different customers and showing their loan information. So let's assume that we have had displayed for one particular customer his or her loan information. So now we have something here, right? We have, let's say, 3 rows with an auto loan, mortgage, and another loan. Okay, so what we want to do first is we're going to clear this last result set. Okay, I know now it's blank, so it's hard to sort of visualize that, but let's assume that there are 3 rows here, or some number. And again, this is going to be offset off of the row 3 where the labels are rather than row 1. Okay, so we're going to find first the last row in this set, and that's going to be that L row. Okay, but it has a similar structure to the way we typically do this. So I'm going to copy, paste, and modify right here. So instead of last row, this is L row. This workbook active sheet range is D3, so that's the offset or anchor cell if you want to think of it that way, and then going down. Okay, that's the D3. So now, because you can see that currently this record set, this sort of section of the worksheet is blank, now this LRO is going to go down into sort of infinity, or it's going to be more than a million. So we have to check whether LRO -1, and then again this is just for offsetting the label purposes, is less than max loans, which is just 10. Okay, if that is the case, and then end if here, if that is the case, then that means there was some resultant set to clear. Okay, there was some resultant set to clear, so we're going to use the construct, this workbook, active sheet, and then we're going to construct a range to clear. Okay, it's going to start at D4, which is this cell right before D3 or below D3, and then we're going to go through, what is it, H, and then L row, and then we're going to select, no drop down, but it does work. We're going to select that range. Okay, so imagining there are three rows here, D4 through, I don't know, H6 would be selected. Okay, and then we're going to clear that selection. Again, no drop downs, but it does work. And then we're going to just reset by reselecting cell D1 at the top, just to clear the selection. Really, nothing's specific here. Okay, save that. And at this point, this might be a good place to pause. So let me just review before I do that. So we've sort of reviewed the variables that we're going to use in this example, sort of explained the reasoning behind using these maxes, which is really to catch those cases where there is nothing on a list, and then the last row goes all the way down to the bottom of the Excel worksheet, which has more than a million rows, which is clearly not what we want to do. So the first check does that for the customer list in column A. Okay, and if we do have some customers, this this condition will be true, and then we start zooming in on those customers by making sure that the selected range is in column A, and between rows essentially 2 and max customers, so 2 and I guess 21 in this case. Okay, and then we're going to check whether the selection is a single cell, because this is just only going to work with a single customer. And then also we going to make sure that none of these blank cells between 12 and I guess 21 are selected. Okay, so then we want to assume that we actually zeroed in on or selected one specific customer. Okay, and then assuming that we already did this for some previous customers, we want to clear any loan information for the previous selection. Okay, which has that same issue of going down to the bottom to a million plus rows. If that's not the case, right, if the last row is less than some reasonably small number like max loans of 10, okay, then we select that range with loan information for the previous customer that was selected and clear it. This needs a T here. And then we're going to pause here, make sure you save it. Okay, switch to the presentation, hit escape.